Hello guys, and welcome back to Raising Reef. In this episode we're going to take a closer look at Caribsea's Real Reef Rock and why I've chosen to use it in my new tank setup. So the system behind me that's been running for a couple of years was set up with some live rock that was moved over from a previous system and a few pieces of dead rock, which was live rock once but has dried out and then was re-established into the aquarium to be recolonised by and seeded by the live rock that went in with it. All previous systems that I've had have been set up using live rock, whether it been originally bought from the shop or moved over from one system to another, and in addition to that I've only ever added dead rock to accompany this. I've never started a system completely with a man-made rock, but there are a few reasons why you might wish to choose to do it this way. So let's get the rock and have a look. So this is all the rock that I've picked up for my new system. They comes in three types. You get some boulder type rocks, which I think they call like reef building rock. They do plate rocks, which are flat plates, and they also do branching rock, which is kind of like Tonga branches. But they didn't have any when I picked up my rock, so I didn't get to choose any of those. I've got a little selection of some boulder type rocks, a couple of little plates, and we'll see what we can make out of that. The good thing about using a dry rock is that you can aquascape your rock without having to worry about water. You can position everything where you want it, take your time. Then once you're happy where everything is, you can go back in and either use a putty or some glue to glue it into place, and the job's a good one. There's a few other reasons why you might want to use this rock. It's man-made rock, but it's made out of all of the same materials that makes up real live rock. Except it doesn't come with any of the critters that may be stowing away in live rock, so you don't end up with nuisance crabs, all sorts of other things that may be coming along in there that you don't want, nuisance algae spores, Aptasia. There's a whole abundance of reef critters that could turn up in your tank when you use live rock that you won't know about until it could be possibly too late, and then you can have a nightmare removing them. So this eliminates that. Also, it's sustainable. None of this rock has been taken, even the ingredients for these rocks hasn't been taken from the ocean, so you know that you're not contributing to the decimation of the reefs, which is a nice thought, considering they're in enough trouble without us getting involved. So where we can limit our impact on the reef, the natural reefs, I think is a good choice and responsible. So they seem to be cured in vats in greenhouses over in America, and they ship it over in boxes packed with newspaper. I believe that this stuff is colonised with bacteria, but I'm going to put my neck out and say that I've had this rock for probably 3 or 4 months now. I've got it in preparation for my tank build, and it's been sitting dry in a polystyrene box. I don't believe that any of the bacteria will be alive. If there is any deep inside the rock, it's going to be negligible. So I'm not going to take that into account when cycling my system. I'm going to be adding a bacteria to it to kickstart that off, and I'm not really going to be concerning myself with any bacteria that may be residual in the rock. It is seeded with rock when you get it, but you don't know how long it's been in transport, how long it's been sitting at the fish shop, so I wouldn't really pay much attention to that. So it's covered in this purple coating, which is simulating coralline algae, which means when you set up the tank, it's going to look quite natural from day one and look a little bit more established than if you'd say just used dead rock. So that's quite nice in the fact that it's going to look a little bit more mature from day one. Also, that coating I believe is supposed to be designed to help stop algae from forming on the tank. It's a good idea to cycle your tank in the dark anyway to help stop any algae from forming, and that allows the bacteria that builds up in the water to colonise all of the rockwork and any of the hard surfaces, and this makes it that little bit more harder for algae to form. So we'll be doing that anyway. We will be cycling our tank in the dark just to make sure that we get the best chance of creating a system that doesn't end up with an algae phase, and we'll be using this rock to do it. There are little like tube worm tourniquets and little bits and residual bits. It looks like a dried up piece of live rock. So it's very natural looking, and I think that most people that choose this will be pleased with the look that they get from it. Obviously this is only going to create a foundation that we are going to be mounting a ton of corals on, so what you'll see of the rock once we're finished doing that will be minimal anyway. We're just going to be using this to create an interesting structure for which we can grow our corals off of. So it gives me peace of mind to know that these rocks are sustainable. You're not introducing any critters into your tank, and you'll have the time you need to play around with the aquascape before you add any water to the system. So these are 3 good plus points to this rock, and I'm looking forward to being able to aquascape my tank completely dry and then fill it up afterwards. This rock doesn't seem to be any cheaper than traditional live rock, and I believe that that's because there's a lot more effort that's going into making, curing and producing all this rock in a manufacturing type environment, rather than just woofing it out of the ocean and shipping it to wherever you want it to go. So you won't be paying less money for an imitation of the original product, but this is marketed as a benefit that you are being responsible and sustainable. It's not a money saving tip. This stuff costs you about the same sort of money as live rock, and I believe it's been priced that way because it's supposed to be a better alternative to taking live rock out of the ocean. There is one downside that I can see to adding this instead of live rock, or not adding any live rock to the system, and that's that although you risk the hitchhikers and the critters that you don't want, there are a lot of beneficial little critters living in live rock that you do want. And I'm a big fan of biodiversity in a reef tank and trying to create as much of an eco-diverse system as possible. I don't use filter socks, and I try to run a refugium, and I like to encourage lots of these little critters to grow and as many different species as possible. I've always noticed an abundance of lots of different critters in my tank, and that is due to using the live rock. If you start off with a sterile environment, it's going to take a lot longer to establish those things, and anything that is in there will have to have been added by you. It may be of advantage to use something like a live sand when you start your reef tank. This is going to be a lot safer, but it does contain a lot of things in the sand that are going to develop into crustaceans and worms that will live in the sand bed and migrate onto the rocks. And this may be a good alternative to going for live rock, or for just going for this sterile type setup, which, to be honest, does fill me with a little bit of trepidation, in the sense that I've always started with live rock and live sand, and I've always had this abundance of diverse life. So it may be a case that I just use a few pieces of live rock that I've already got to add to this system, even on a temporary basis. I may even just put some of those into the refugium section of the new setup and allow that to feed the rest of the system with all of these little critters that I so much enjoy seeing in the reef tank. That's the only downside to this rock, but there are ways around it. So don't let that put you off of picking this rock as a choice for your reef system. It's not a cheaper alternative, as I said, but I think it's a better alternative. The more responsible we can be to the reef, I think the better the reef will cope. So that about covers this this little episode on the Reef Rock. I just wanted to go over why I'm using this rock, what's good about it, why I decided to choose it, and hopefully it will give you a little bit more of an idea of whether this is going to be the right rock for you. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.